I'm 62 years old now, and I've learned something most people only understand after it's too late. The best decisions in life rarely feel comfortable when you're making them. Back in 1995, I was 32 years old, sitting in a quiet attorney's office in downtown Denver, signing the deed to my very first home. A 2-bedroom condo in downtown Denver. It wasn't flashy, but to me it felt like freedom. My name was printed clearly on every page. Emma Marie Richardson. No one else. When we finished, my lawyer and longtime friend, Sarah, leaned back in her chair and studied me carefully. Then she said something I laughed at the time, but would later thank God for. Emma, if you ever get married, think very carefully before you tell your husband about this place. I laughed. Told her she was overthinking things. Sarah didn't laugh back. Not all love stories have happy endings, she said quietly. And not everyone who loves you for the right reasons. I brushed it off. I was young, successful, and certain nothing bad could happen to me. I had no idea that just 3 years later, those exact words would stop someone from stealing my entire life. Because before I owned that condo, I watched my mother lose everything. And that moment changed me forever. What I saw happen to my mother at 16 is the reason I made a decision most women never think to make. And it's the reason my husband would later fail to destroy me. I was 16 years old when my mother lost her house. Not because she couldn't afford it. Not because she didn't work hard enough. She lost it because she trusted the wrong person. When my parents divorced, my father's lawyer argued that since he'd paid most of the mortgage, the house was primarily his. My mother had lived there for 30 years, raised children there, built her entire life there, but she had nothing in writing. I watched her pack decades of memories into cardboard boxes, one room at a time, while my father stood in the doorway acting like it was just business. That image stayed with me. So years later, when I finally had real money in my savings account, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not a bigger apartment. Not nicer furniture. I wanted security. By 1992, I'd been promoted to senior marketing manager at a telecommunications company in Denver. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I was renting a small place in Capitol Hill, but it didn't feel permanent. I wanted something no one could ever take from me. Something with my name on it. So I saved. For years. No vacations. No impulse spending. And in 1995, I finally found it. A 2-bedroom condo in the Lodo district. It cost $175,000, which felt outrageous back then. I put down $35,000, every dollar I'd saved over 8 careful years. The mortgage was tight, but it was mine. Sarah made sure of that. She handled every document, every signature, every detail. When it was over, she slid the papers across the table and smiled. "You're smart, Em," she said. "A lot of women don't think about these things until it's too late." "I learned from my mom," I told her. She nodded. "Good. Keep learning." I moved in that spring and poured myself into the place. Painted the walls myself. Chose every piece of furniture. Built a quiet, peaceful life that belonged to no one but me. For 2 years, that condo was my sanctuary. And then one summer night in 1997, I met a man who would test everything I thought I knew about love. He was charming, successful, and said all the right things. And I had no idea he was already planning his future inside my home. I met James Mitchell at a company networking event in the summer of 1997. He was 34, confident, well-dressed, and effortlessly charming. The kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room, even in a crowd of hundreds. He told me he worked in real estate investment, that he was an entrepreneur, that he had multiple ventures in motion. I didn't ask for details. I should have. But I was flattered. And lonely in that quiet, successful way people don't talk about. We talked for hours that night. When I got home, my cheeks hurt from smiling. James called the next day. Then the next. Within weeks, he was part of my routine. Dinner dates. Weekend trips. Long conversations about the future. He seemed established. Drove a nice car. Wore expensive suits. Paid for everything without hesitation. Compared to the men I'd dated before, he felt solid. We dated for a year and a half. During that time he met Sarah. She was polite, friendly, but later that night she pulled me aside. "There's something about him I can't quite put my finger on," she said quietly. "Just be careful, okay? I laughed it off. I was in love. 8 months into our relationship, James started talking about moving in together. His lease was ending, he said. Why pay for two places when we were together every night anyway? Financially, it made sense. Emotionally, it felt like the next step. I hesitated, remembering Sarah's warning from years earlier. But James took my hand, looked me in the eyes and smiled. We're heading toward marriage anyway, he said. Why wait? So I agreed. But I made one decision I didn't tell anyone about. I didn't tell him I owned the condo. When he asked about the landlord, I stayed vague. Said I had a great arrangement with building management. He never pressed. And in September of 1998, James moved into my home, bringing with him more than just his clothes. What I didn't see then were the red flags already lining the hallway of my own house. At first, living together felt easy, comfortable, like we were finally building something real. James settled into my condo quickly. His clothes filled my closet. His furniture replaced pieces I'd chosen myself. His routines became part of my days. For a while I loved it. Then the small things started. When the mortgage bill came, James never reached for it. You've got this one, babe, he'd say casually. I'm a little short this month. It happened once. Then twice. Then so many times I stopped counting. There was always a reason. A deal fell through. A client paid late. The market was slow. Yet somehow his lifestyle never changed. He still drove that nice car. Still wore expensive suits. Still took clients to high-end restaurants on his credit cards. I told myself successful people had uneven cash flow. That entrepreneurship came with ups and downs. Then his mother arrived. Patricia Mitchell came to stay 3 months after James moved in. She was in her early 60s, perfectly groomed, layered in jewelry I later learned was all costume. She walked through my condo like she was inspecting a hotel room she hadn't approved. James deserves better than this, she said to him in my kitchen, not quite whispering. When you two are married, you'll need to upgrade. James smiled awkwardly. He didn't defend me. Patricia stayed for a week. The longest week of my life. She commented on everything. My furniture. My cooking. My career. She told me men were better at handling finances. Suggested I let James take the lead, once we were married. Then she crossed a line. One evening I came home from work and found her sitting at my kitchen table, going through my mail. I'm just helping organize, she said, smiling. Her eyes didn't match the expression. That night after she left, I called Sarah. Am I crazy? I asked. Or is his mother trying to take over my life? You're not crazy, Sarah said. Please tell me you haven't put his name on anything. The condo. Your accounts. Anything. No, I said. Nothing. Thank God, she replied. Keep it that way. I wish I'd listened even harder. Because a few months later James proposed. And I said yes. I thought marriage would calm the tension. Instead, it gave them exactly what they were waiting for. Wedding planning moved fast. Too fast. James suddenly cared about things he'd never mentioned before. Budgets. Assets. Future planning. One night, he came home unusually cheerful, carrying a thin folder. I talked to a financial advisor today, he said, setting it on the table. Just to make sure we're protected once we're married. Protected. The word sounded responsible. Mature. I opened the folder. Inside were documents labeled property consolidation and marital asset alignment. Why is my condo listed here? I asked, scanning the pages. James laughed softly. It's just a formality. Once we're married, everything's shared anyway. Something tightened in my chest. This says I'd be transferring partial ownership, I said. That's not a formality. He sighed, suddenly tired. Elena, why are you being so defensive? I'm your future husband. The next day Patricia called. I'm glad James is finally thinking long-term, she said. A woman shouldn't hold property over her husband. It creates imbalance. Imbalance. That word echoed in my head all afternoon. That evening I met Sarah for coffee and showed her the documents. She didn't even finish reading before closing the folder. Do not sign this, she said firmly. But we're getting married, I said. Isn't this normal? No, she said. What's normal is transparency. What's happening here is pressure. When I got home, James was waiting. You talked to Sarah, he said. Not a question. Yes. His smile disappeared. I don't like outsiders influencing our relationship, he said. This is between us. I looked at him then, really looked. The charm was still there. The confidence. The easy smile. But underneath it was something else. Expectation. Assumption. Control. I'm not signing anything, I said quietly. James didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And that scared me more than anger ever could. Because the next morning, I learned James had already made plans, without my consent. The discovery didn't come from James. Came from an email. Subject line. Congratulations on your upcoming marriage. It was from my bank. I opened it, confused, and read the first line twice. We've received a preliminary inquiry regarding joint asset restructuring scheduled after your wedding date. My hands went cold. Preliminary inquiry. Joint assets. I hadn't authorized anything. I drove straight to the branch. The manager recognized me immediately. I'd been there for years. Someone called yesterday, he said carefully. Your fiancé. He asked about converting individual accounts into joint holdings. Did you give him access? I asked. No, he said. But he seemed very confident. Said it was already agreed. Already agreed. I walked out shaking. At home, James was on the phone, pacing, laughing. He stopped when he saw my face. You went to the bank, he said. Yes, I replied. Why were you making inquiries about my accounts? He exhaled slowly like I was exhausting him. Elena, I was planning ahead. That's what adults do. Planning without me is not planning, I said. It's control. His jaw tightened. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I said. You are. That night, Patricia came over uninvited. She sat on my couch like she owned it. In my day, she said, women trusted their husbands. They didn't act like frightened children guarding their toys. I stood up. My condo is not a toy, I said. And my life is not a tradition. James didn't defend me. He watched. Observed. Like he was taking notes. Later in bed, he turned toward me. You're changing, he said softly. You weren't like this before. I stared at the ceiling. No, I whispered. I'm just finally paying attention. Because that night I realized something terrifying. They weren't asking for permission anymore. They were assuming surrender. And 2 days later, I found out exactly what James and his mother were waiting for me to give up next. 2 days later, Sarah called me before I even had time to sit down at work. Her voice was tight. Elena, she said. Did you sign anything yesterday? No, I replied immediately. Why? There was a pause on the line. Because I just received a copy of a document with your signature on it. My stomach dropped. She emailed it to me while we were still on the phone. First glance, it looked real. My name. My handwriting. My signature. But it wasn't mine. The document transferred partial ownership of my condo to James Mitchell. Dated 2 days earlier. Filed. I couldn't breathe. I never signed this, I whispered. I know, Sarah said. Because I still have the original deed. And this isn't how you sign your name. I left work immediately. When I got home, James was calm. Too calm. He sat at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. Where did you get this? I asked, throwing the papers down. He glanced at them and sighed. I was going to tell you. When? I demanded. After the wedding? After I didn't own my home anymore. Patricia stepped out of the hallway. You're being dramatic, she said. It's just paperwork. That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I said 3 words I'd never said to James before. Get out. Now. James stared at me. You don't mean that. I do, I said. Pack your things. Patricia laughed. You can't throw him out, she said. He lives here. I looked at her. No, I said calmly. I do. What happened next forced James to show his real face. And it ended everything. James and Patricia were gone by the end of the day. The police were involved immediately. Sarah and I walked through every step of the forgery, every email, every document. James had tried to sell my condo, forge my signature, and manipulate everyone around him. But he hadn't counted on one thing, me. The investigation revealed a history of the same scam. 2 previous wives, the same pattern, Patricia coaching him along the way. He was charged with forgery and attempted fraud. Patricia received probation for her part. The courts returned everything to me. My condo. My savings. My investments. My life. I filed for divorce the same week. No shared assets, no drawn-out battles. Just freedom, and a reminder of the one thing that mattered. I had protected myself. Months later, sitting on my balcony with Sarah, wine in hand, we watched the Denver sunset. Do you ever regret it? She asked. No, I said. I learned that you can love someone without giving them the power to destroy your life. And sometimes the most important love is the one you give yourself. 3 years later, I sold the condo at a profit and bought a home entirely on my own terms. I never remarried. I never felt the need to. I had independence, dignity, and peace. And above my desk, framed and glowing in the afternoon light, hung that original 1995 deed. Emma Marie Richardson. Just my name. No one else's. Everything else? Optional. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire and remind us what matters most. Click a video to continue the journey.